What is going on, everybody? Welcome to my latest episode of 49ers First Takes. I wanted to get right into it today. I don't know if you guys are aware of who Brian Peacock is. He's not only the best 49er podcaster out there, but he runs 49ers. Oh my God, I'm stumbling here. He is one half of Locked On 49ers. He is one half of Locked On NFL with Matt Williamson. And to me, he's the best Niner podcaster out there as far as daily news on everything 49ers. So I'm going to bring him in. We're going to hit up on the draft a little bit and then talk any 49er recent news that needs to be talked about. So let me welcome in Brian Peacock.
What's up, man? Yeah, look, it doesn't matter what the name of the podcast is. The important part is that I'm the best podcaster out there.
Oh, you're good. You're definitely my go-to. I mean, I used to listen to a lot of KNBR stuff when Larry was there, but now that Larry's not there anymore, be honest with you, I don't really pay attention to them.
Yeah, so, Larry jumping in on the YouTube game as well, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I had him on. I think I caught him at a bad time, though. He looked like he was pretty sleepy. I had him on early. What day was it? It was early in the morning. It might have been Thursday or Friday. And then I had Rohan Chakravarthy and now yourself. I figure I wanted to kind of go to the three guys who I think have the best kind of slant or, just are really good with their information on all these players that the 49ers have selected. And I figure I had to do the Trinity. I had to do Larry, Rohan, and then yourself. So you may be the last, but you're definitely not the least. So let's get into it, though.
Let's do it up. Yeah, it was an interesting draft class for the 49ers. And Croc and I have been doing the deep dives on prospects here on Locked On 49ers. And so we're working our way down the list. And really the fun one was, what day is it right now? I don't even know what day it is anymore. It's Monday, right?
Monday.
So today's episode was Tyrion Davis-Price, the running back. And he's been really the most divisive pick for the 49ers this year. Maybe the most surprising pick there with the third round running back. So that was fun going deep on him. And we had Damian Parson of the Draft Network, and he's a running back specialist, jump on and talk about him with us too. And so, yeah, it's been fun to go deeper and crunch the film on some of these prospects and see how they might fit into the 49ers.
Definitely. Before I get into that, I just want to say hi to the chat real quick. I want to say hi to Mariah from 49er Faithfully. Thank you for popping in here once again. Niner Faithful, always in here. Thanks for the support. Frank Tom Ocean, you have been one of my guys for a very, very long time. So I just want to say thanks a lot. And thank you. I'm wearing this lid until I start to get like sweat marks on it. Then I know it's time to put it down. But yeah, this is one of my favorite hats so far. It structures my face well. It makes me look less like I have a really fat head. So anytime a hat can do that, I'm down for it. So I'll circle back to Drake Jackson, but we'll start on Tyrion Davis-Price. What was your overall reaction? As a lot of people were pretty negative on the pick when it happened. I wasn't necessarily negative, but I thought safety was more of a pressing need. What was the overall? What's your overall take on him? If you had to give him a grade, and just the overall thought on the pick itself.
Oh, I mean, it's still not a good grade on the pick on the third down running back, and there's even just beyond my own observations, my own evaluation of him as a prospect. There's really nobody I can find that I value their opinion on either running backs or prospects or the draft or football in general that really thought he should have been necessarily higher than a fifth round pick. So just the value of the prospect period, I don't think was high. Going back to the well with a third round running back, I don't think was the best use of resources. And the 49ers have clearly every time, and I don't know if it's a blind spot. You know how some teams are really good at picking players, and the Steelers are really good at picking wide receivers, and you see them select a really high upside player, like George Pickens in the second round. You think, well, that's going to be a hit. And then you see the Packers, who are really good finding offensive linemen later in the draft. They go select Sean Ryan out of UCLA in the third round. And then the fourth round come back with Zach Tom, who's a player I really liked for the 49ers. And you think, gosh, they're going to hit on those guys, aren't they? And then with the 49ers, their best players have been the forgotten ones. In fact, the best running back the 49ers have had in the Kyle Shanahan regime, the player that they've put the most resources into was a 6th round pick, because
Yeah.
everyone beyond that had been a street free agent or an undrafted free agent that had been the good running backs in Kyle Shanahan's offense. Not the 3rd rounder from last year, not the not the free agents they brought in, and not the 4th round picks. So it's really interesting. And I think it was an unnecessary selection for the 49ers, but he could still be a good player too.
Right.
And, if he was a 6th rounder, I would say that was, I don't know, necessarily see the scheme fit, because that's the other thing is the 49ers are really trying to force what feels like a square peg into a round hole with Kyle Shanahan's offense. Is like, we need more power. We're going to draft a bunch of guards, and we need to be big and tough and physical and bully people. But then the players that end up playing well are the guys who run the 4-3s and get out and are dynamic. And Deebo Samuel, a wide receiver, coming in playing running back and being dynamic. And the more they use him as a true running back and try to use him between the tackles, the less effective he was too. And they tried it with Sermon last year. Didn't quite work. I think there's going to be a lot of parallels drawn between Sermon and Ty Davis-Price, and maybe that's unfair to Davis-Price because they're different players. And I think TDP hits the hole a little quicker, a little harder, and he's a little stronger of a runner than Sermon is. And maybe Sermon's more elusive, but maybe that's what this offense needs, is that just no nonsense player, which Ty Davis-Price is, and maybe he'll be a fit. But I still think they got themselves probably a committee back in the 3rd round, which is it's just too high for me. So, and it's nothing against Tyrion Davis-Price. I think he could be a good short yardage back at the very least for the 49ers, and maybe have the small piece of the pie as far as the committee goes, if it's a 2-headed monster, if Sermon's really not in the mix, or if Jeff Wilson's not in the mix. But it's an interesting pick, and to me, it's not. Even though I like the player more that I've watched, the more I've watched him, the more I liked of him. But still, I would not stamp that as like that's a really good pick in the 3rd round. It doesn't make sense to me.
How much of this pick do you think was, we want to take the load off Deebo? We're not satisfied with, or that we're not satisfied with what Trey Sermon showed us last year. Maybe he's not what we thought. Like, I feel like I don't know which way to slice this one. What the Niners thinking was behind it. Because if you already nailed that last year with Trey Sermon, I don't think you come, because safety just seemed like when they picked a running back, most fans were dumbfounded. People who don't even follow the draft as far as knowing who a lot of these prospects are, just a normal casual person like myself. I'm like, really? Running back again? Like, could have used the safety. We really could have, because I look at the safeties that we're going into camp with, and I'm not super encouraged. So, what do you think more of the argument was? We did not satisfy with Trey Sermon, or we're trying to do whatever we can to appease Deebo, or is it something else?
I mean, I don't think it's the Deebo thing at all, because they're not at all similar. You're not going to replace any Deebo usage with Ty Davis-Price. So that's just they're I've already sort of made fun of teams because everyone is like, oh, we got to find the next Deebo, in the draft. Like, oh, this guy's Deebo. This guy could be used like Deebo. This guy could be used like Deebo. No, Deebo's one of a kind. Deebo is
Deebo.
Don't try to find him. And the idea that you're going to replace what Deebo was and how special he was with, you roll out there with a certain package and you look like you're going 3 wide, but now it's actually 21 personnel with 2 running backs and one or 2 running backs and 1 tight end, and Deebo's in the backfield as a running back. You don't have that with just rolling a running back out there. It's not like I feel like people are getting a little galaxy brain with, oh, you're replacing Deebo with a running back. And it's like, well, so you're using a running back as a running back? Like every team has done since the history of football,
right.
Beginning of football. Like that's not outthinking anybody playing a running back as running back. So the Deebo stuff, to me, that's not it at all. What it is to me is that Kyle Shanahan wants to run the ball. That's the identity of the team. Young quarterback, protect the young quarterback. They're going to run the heck out of the football, and they value running backs more than I personally do. I think that's just all it is. And they don't care if he's a committee back. They want to be physical. They wanted a bigger back, and Sermon wasn't it last year. And you look at the team coming back in back-to-back drafts, drafting a 3rd round running back and 2 guards, essentially. Clearly they weren't blown away by what they saw from their rookie class last year. So they kind of went back to the well and did the exact same thing again. And hopefully with, those 3 running backs and 4 guards they've drafted over the last 2 years, they're going to hit on enough of them to give you some of that value back. And to me, I don't think it's the greatest use of resources. And also, like you, man, I got questions about the safety position. And there wasn't much left if you're looking for sort of a dynamic safety option after that 93 pick. So that's definitely where I would have gone in a different direction than the 49ers did. But we'll see. If they got a superstar in Ty Davis-Price, we'll all be excited about him. And then we have to argue about whether or not they re-sign him after his rookie contract is over, which is something that I also would say you shouldn't do, which is why you shouldn't draft the players high, because you don't want to have to spend on them later either. And if the argument is just that, look, Kyle Shanahan's backfields have had a ton of injuries all the time, that's also another reason why you would not draft the player so early. You would draft them late and keep filtering the volume of running backs in there, and they've proven that they can find good backs. You're not guaranteed to find a great back if you draft them late. You're certainly not guaranteed to find a good back if you draft them early either, though. So keep drafting them late, keep filtering in so you have the depth and you have yourself covered. Third round, Ty Davis-Price. Nothing against the player as much as just the value of the pick didn't make any sense to me.
I think me and you must be from the same generation. We are pretty close in age. I completely agree on getting late round running backs. You just don't spend resources on running backs. One, because it's a physical position and they take a lot of pounding. And two, you can always, the Shanahan lineage has proven that they can find undrafted free agents, 6th round running backs, and somehow work them into a really dynamic offense. So yeah, I wasn't necessarily mad at the pick, but if I had to make a choice of whether I would have went safety or at running back, I probably would have went safety. Not that a 3rd round safety might crack the starting lineup, but still, I just feel like the running back was just almost like they're overindulging for some reason, and I don't know what that reason is.
Yeah, I to sort of add to that a little bit as well, because I just don't think that there's never this. If you're going to draft a 3rd round running back, first of all, he better be really good, right?
Yeah.
And he better be dynamic and, a weapon in the passing game. Kyle Shanahan doesn't really use running backs in the passing game all that much. And Ty Davis-Price wouldn't be really that type of guy anyway, and be that guy either. So if he's not dynamic in the outside zone game, he's not much of a receiver, then you're really getting a one-dimensional back, even if he is really good at that one dimension. It's still,
right.
The value doesn't add up. And Ken has a good question here about
I was just going to ask you.
Would have been there later. And I get this question a lot. And so I usually get pretty deep into the draft. And if I'm ever critical of a pick, sometimes fans will get mad at me. You say, oh, you didn't like this pick. Well, he wasn't going to be there in the next round. And my response to that is always, I don't care.
Right.
So what? Draft somebody else. If he wasn't valuable at the spot, somebody else takes him. So what? There have been other running backs. There was a ton of other running backs in this class that would have just pushed one more running back down to the next pick. So, that's always my response when I don't like a pick and someone says, oh, he wasn't going to be there at the next round. My answer is, so what? Clearly, I don't value the player at that pick, so you let someone else take him if they do. And if he's available later for you still, then maybe it's a better value. Maybe you like him there after you addressed another need. And one of the big things with running back is the opportunity cost. So not only is are you drafting a position that you can find talent in later, you're also not allowing yourself the opportunity on day 2 when you're trying to build the strength of your team is in the first couple of days, and you should be trying to get starting caliber players there. You're not allowing yourself to attempt to draft a player that you can't find later, because there's certain positions where it's really hard after the top 100 picks or so to find high caliber players at certain position groups. And so it's the opportunity cost of not being able to draft one of those positions with your 3rd round pick, which is probably the most egregious reason why if I was personally running a team, running backs are not on the board unless they are really dynamic until the 4th round. Then you put the running backs on the board, and there's no kickers or punters on the board until round 6. Then you put those guys on the board and you say, okay, well, can we go to this position now? Just because you're not giving yourself an opportunity to draft positions that you really just can't draft later. And it's so much harder at other positions to find one later where you actually can find good players later, as the 49ers have proven. And by the way, if you're an undrafted free agent, if I'm the agent for an undrafted running back, the 49ers are 1.1 on my list. Like, that is the team I want my client to go to. So the 49ers should be able, after every draft, be able to get the best undrafted running back that they can find on the market. And that's even if they draft some late round running backs. But I'm not against drafting running backs. I would do it every single year. It would just be on day 3 after, those position groups, after starters at other positions. I've been I've tried to attack those first.
Totally agree 100%. TDP. Ken Martinez, want to say thank you for the $2 super. I appreciate it, brother. And I hope that answered your question. What was I going to ask? And I go back up here before we get into the next one. Oh, yeah. USMC Niners for Life says, remember his dad had 3 1,000-yard rushers. He probably listened, he probably should listen to his dad with running backs by committee. Yeah. That's my only, that's the way I look at it now. And that's how I looked at it back then. His dad, I just don't understand the 3rd round pick when you did it last year and the guy didn't even work out. He wasn't part of anything. I don't know what the reasons were. It's almost like they used last year's draft notes and just like reused them for this year's draft. Like it's
crazy. 3rd round running back, 2 guards and 2 corners. So
pretty similar.
Did they hate their class last year? Did they need depth that bad at all those positions? They have really, when you look at the offensive line too, the 49ers, and they needed depth at running back, and you do need coverage for injured running backs for sure. So, it's not like it was weird that they drafted a running back. I just didn't think at 93 was the right spot. And
what's your grade on him? If you had to put a grade, mine would probably be like a D or
a D. I'm not going to put an F on him because there is some talent there, but the scheme fit doesn't make sense to me. They're trying to do something, and we'll see if all of a sudden under Trey Lance, this is a completely different offense and it's, more power, more inside zone. And maybe that's the idea behind it, because it seems like they're really trying to force that with these last 2 drafts. But from what we've seen with past Shanahan offenses, it's the fast guys, the wide zone guys that can really stress the defense horizontally and then stick their foot in the ground and get upfield. Those are the players, and that's not where Ty Davis-Price shines. But he should be he's a really good short yardage back. But, how valuable is a short yardage back in this game?
Exactly. You could have got him in a later round. There's plenty of them. If you okay, so I'll jump over now to a pick that I think you enjoyed, as a lot of us did, with the drafting of Drake Jackson, edge out of USC. Didn't know much about him. I didn't realize that Nick Bonito had went already when the pick happened. So when when I was on Twitter after this pick, every single person, guys like you, anybody who follows the draft, has done any scouting work on this year's class, everybody was a big Drake Jackson fan. Your thoughts on him, and if you had to give him a grade, what would that be?
Yeah, and I liked Drake Jackson over Nick Bonito too, because of what he can be, because of his frame, and he's already 270 at his pro day, and when really what seals it for me with Drake Jackson is, because the first time I watched him in depth, it was like, oh man, I love 50% of this player, but I'm really let down at the other 50% because he was so small. He was only 240 something pounds is what they wanted him to play at USC last year. And he was this stand-up sort of a outside linebacker rusher. And I was like, man, there is no speed to power in his game. He's so flexible and so good at getting around the edge. And he's got those long arms, and you can see the talent, and it's stuff that you can't teach. But man, does not have enough hip sync and strength against the run. And he has no speed to power with his moves. There's no power behind anything as a pass rusher. And I was really worried about that. And then you go back and you watch his freshman tape, and he looks like a different player. He's so much bigger and thicker. And it was really eye-opening to see that, and then see how quickly he got to 270 pounds after the combine, and to still work out really well at that other weight, and then see him as a freshman where he still had all the flexibility, all the burst off the edge, but all of his moves had a little bit more power behind him. His
right.
hands were stronger, his legs were stronger. And so that's what excites me about Drake Jackson over some of the other one-dimensional rushers is I think you can dare to dream what he could be, and you can project a multi-dimensional defensive end who can be an every down player across from Bosa.
Right.
And very worst, you're going to get a rotational pass rusher, which is worth pick 61 anyway. And I think he's going to be a better pro than a college player. But at that, 260, 265, 270, he doesn't need to get crazy with the weight. He doesn't need to be over 270 or 265 is probably where I'd want him, because I want him to be powerful, but I still want him to be quick throughout his career. You don't want to slow down that first step or anything. So with his flexibility that you can't teach, seeing him be able to get the quarterback off the edge, but then have a little bit more power into his game, a little more speed to power, the long arm, and be able to set the edge against the run. That's exciting. And the 49ers have needed that. And before the draft, they had done a lot of work on defensive ends, and they even brought in Kamoko Toure. And I thought, man, that signals to me that they really were looking at that position at 61 but they had brought in so many players that they probably think that they're not going to get a guy there. So they're going to look in a different direction. And when Drake Jackson fell, props to them for still, wanting to keep a strength. And none of those guys that they have on the roster are signed beyond next year. So a long-term piece to play that D Ford role. And you saw how much better it made everybody on the 49ers defense when they had both Bosa and that D Ford type rusher on the other side. And I think that's what it can be for their defense this year. So the Drake Jackson pick was a home run. I think it was huge. And he's another one. The more I watch him, the more I'm excited about it, because I think he can be a complete defensive end and a terror off the edge.
Yeah. A lot of people are saying he could play base end, and he could also play, edge in the, if they're, what do they call the NASCAR package? You have him in on third down, so to speak.
Yeah, he can stand up and you can put his hand in the ground, and they don't even need him to really play on early downs as a rookie if they don't want to.
Right, they have enough
options, and they can keep guys fresh and rotate him in and out. But he can be an every down guy. And if I had to guess, it's Bosa and Jackson that'll log the most snaps at defensive end this year.
One thing I'll say about the Niners, again, I'm critical a lot because I've liked the team for 30 plus years. But then the one thing I do appreciate about the Shanahan Lynch era is, like, when they have a strength, man, they don't shy away from adding to the strength and adding to it again. Like that defensive line, if everybody, that's always a thing. If everybody stays healthy, you always got to preface it with that. Man, talk about like 3 waves of players that can all rush the passer. And I think you alleviate injury to a guy like Nick Bosa if you're able to give him a breather now and then. And you have people that could come in and, give him the breather, because there was times last year when I was watching where it was Bosa or bust. And I was like, man, that's how you get that guy hurt. He's already got enough issues with injuries as it is, but when he's your only guy and he's getting double, triple teamed on every rush and no one else is getting home, at least the first half of the year. I felt like the second half of the year, guys like Samson Ebukam and Arden Key had a good second half, but man, first half of the year was pretty tough. I mean, it looked like
it's a good point, and Abelcom's got to look out because he's got a little bit of a value to his contract that
he's a little pricey.
Niners, if they're looking for some cap space, and I've mentioned all those bodies they have on the defensive line, he's going to have to make sure that he's either 1 or 2 on the opposite side behind Nick Bosa to cash that paycheck, because Kemoko Toure is there now to compete, and they brought in a rookie that can compete, and you don't want to carry Abukam's salary if he's not going to be one of the top rushers. And he started out like not good the first half of the year, and then he got a lot better in the second half. So is that the guy you expect? So that's an interesting one there, and I wonder if the 49ers might have to make some tough cuts on the defensive line now, just because they have so many bodies there, and it's
always a good problem to have, I guess.
Right. And everybody has played better under Chris Kusurik as a rusher than they did before. So if that happens with Toure and that happens with Drake Jackson, look out. And so Abukam is going to be fighting for his job in training camp. That's for sure.
Yeah. And then we brought back, forgot, from Seattle. Please remind the pass rusher.
I can't think of it right now either.
Right.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
That dude.
This is what happens. This is what happens during the NFL draft every year. Is my brain is not big enough to remember every draft class and every player. And like my son Leo the other day, I called him Debo. Like, this is what happens is, like, I fill my brain with all this useless knowledge of, well, it's not useless anymore because I get paid for it. But
thank you, Hyder.
I was just like a draftnik and just like, wasn't getting paid for all my draft knowledge. I'm just inputting all of these names into my mind in scouting reports, and other stuff is getting erased. Like childhood memories are getting erased. And
something's getting bumped out of there. You can't keep it all.
Gary Hyder. So I have to go back and be like, oh yeah, I just learned like 300 new prospects. I got to go back and remember who's actually on the 49ers now. And another thing I do after the draft is I like really place mentally prospects with teams, and you do these mock drafts, and I have to remind myself who actually went where later on. I'm like, oh yeah, that's where that player went. For some reason, I thought he was on the Bucks, and the Bucks didn't draft a guard in the first round. They moved out of the first round. So yeah, the draft really messes with my mind because I spend so much time on it. And it's so much new information, and I'm not smart enough to retain all of that every year and still have old memories knocking around in the old dome.
Yeah, once you get in your 40s, man, it's tough. I'm going towards 43, so I have pretty good memories with my youth. It's more of the stuff that's happened recently is what I have real problems with. wanted to say thank you real quick to Luke Luna. It's been a while since I've seen you in here, brother. He is a tattoo and son of a gun. Tries to catch the channel when he can, when he's tattooing. It's probably what he's doing right now. So thank you for the $2 super. I appreciate it. And for all the discussion in the chat about how I feel about Debo and Jimmy still and that whole situation. How do you think I feel? He's still on the team. I had a Rams fan in here saying that's how it felt when we had Goff on the team. Yeah, it is what it is. The Jimmy situation, no control over it. The Debo situation, the Niners have plenty of control. They just got to pay him, and then everything will be fine. But yeah, that there was a little bit of discussion going on between Ram and Niner fans about that whole thing that's going on right now.
Debo's going to get paid. 49ers fans don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere.
They made their play, and it's pretty clear now. There's only one team to negotiate with. That's the 49ers. I think they're going to get it done. I don't know what happened early in negotiations that really pissed off Debo, but I think cooler heads are going to prevail. You know, some time will heal those wounds, and he'll get paid a nice little chunk. And his market's set, so the 49ers know that they're going to have to pay him pretty much what A.J. Brown got. So, you know, I think it's a pretty easy negotiation from here on out.
Yep. So your overall B on Drake Jackson, I would say B plus.
I mean, I think this could be. I put an A- on this one because
even better.
This is a player that if he was drafted at pick 28, you know, or 32 in the first round, I wouldn't have batted an eye at it, you know, because that's the prospect I've compared him to the most is Harold Landry. And I loved Harold Landry. I think Harold Landry had a little bit more secondary moves than Drake Jackson when he was coming out, but he didn't have the frame and he didn't have the length that Drake Jackson does to be that every down end. So I kind of see why, even though I thought Harold Landry should have been a first rounder, I see why he slid to the beginning of the second round. But for Drake Jackson to be all the way down at 61, this is a guy that if he becomes what I envision he can be in the 49ers defense with Chris Kocurek, this is a first round player all day, an impact every down edge rusher. And you can't teach the kind of bend and flexibility he has around the edge. And so that's going to be fun to watch. So I think that's an A draft pick to be able to get that kind of impact value all the way down at 61.
Nice. We go to the round 3, pick 105, Danny Gray. It's funny. I've heard kind of two sides of it. I've been listening to you guys, and Eric Crocker is not necessarily negative. He's breaking them down and kind of looking at them. And he has more of a realistic, I guess, approach to what people think Danny Gray might be and what he could get better at. I thought it was a great pick, a wide receiver, a guy who has some burn to him, because the Niners are a little bit slow in the wide receiver department. They really haven't had anybody in a long time that could really, or at least we think, stretch the field, maybe since like Marquise Goodwin or that other guy that used to play for us, Ted Ginn.
Oh, right. Ted Ginn. Yeah. Going back a little ways.
God, my brain. And, so he's got the 4.33 speed. He's, depending on where you see, he's either 6 foot, 5'11", 6'1". So he fits right in with the height with the Niners receivers that they already have. But what's your take on the pick, and what do you think about what Croc has to say about him as far as what he's kind of seen some things on film that don't necessarily pop off the page on at you when you watch him?
Yeah, Danny Gray's height, I think, is 5'11" and 5'8", or 3/4. So he's exact same height as both Debo and Ayuk, and they're all between 5'11" and a half and 6 feet, just under 6 feet is what he is. But no, he can blaze, and his 40 time doesn't really tell the whole story, because I don't think he even got a great jump out of the box in his first 10 yards. So his flying 20, his last 20 yards is where he's really getting to top speed. So his top speed and his GPS is legit. Like he's going to be really fast, clearly, but he doesn't play to that speed with his routes. And I think that's where Croc nailed it. And it's not necessarily negative. It's just like, this is what the player is. And it's funny because Kyle Shanahan talked about Travis Benjamin. He said, yeah, we always want to have someone with a lot of speed like that, like we had with Travis Benjamin. It's like, Travis Benjamin got targeted 4 times all season. So I hope you're planning on using this guy a lot more than that, right? But you have to be realistic. He was the 105th pick in the draft. He wasn't a first round player or anything. He has a ton of speed. When you have that much speed and you're not one of the first 100 players selected, there's going to be some negatives, and there's going to be some skills you need to work on. And one thing he has that you can't teach, and it's kind of like the Drake Jackson thing. He can't teach the thing that's difficult. So let's see if we can teach the rest. And so he's got that speed, and he can absolutely be somebody that takes the top off the defense. He's got some pretty good ball tracking skills when the ball's in the air. He's not necessarily I'm going to go moss guys and go up and yank the ball out of the sky necessarily, but he does have some pretty decent ball skills, I think, on those deep balls, and he can track the ball fine, which is important for the deep ball player, because if you can't track the ball and you have no ball skills, then what good is the speed there anyway? But really where the speed shines to me, and this is where they talked about after the draft, Shanahan referenced his toughness. And it's not so much his toughness like Debo, where you're breaking tackles and you're going over the middle and you're hitting people and you're blocking like crazy. It's not that toughness. It's more the fearlessness, like a punt returner, like turning an offensive play into a punt return, where if you get him on a crosser and he catches the ball, he sees daylight and he's going to go, and he can outrun angles. He's crazy fast that way. So, those plays where Shanahan's so good at just scheming a player open, I think that's where Danny Gray's value is going to come from early in his career. Now, he's going to be somebody that can run off the coverage for you for sure and open things up for other guys underneath, and maybe you can pop one to him on a deep post or a deep crosser or a go route or something like that occasionally, even though we know Shanahan doesn't call a ton of those. But when he does, he tries to scheme open one of those types of plays as well. So we might see a couple of those, but don't expect a ton. Don't expect him to be on the field a ton, because he's going to walk in at most wide receiver 5. Right.
True.
So we'll see what role he is and which player he's backing up. He'll probably back up Ayuk. Maybe they've got visions of him backing up Debo a little bit to try to just get him the ball in space and see if he can do some catch and run type of stuff. I don't know if he's going to get handed the ball out of the backfield or anything like that, but they might try it just to see if he's someone that can do that, because he's pretty good on those, taking basically short passes the distance. And Kyle Shanahan loves those guys who can take a slant to the house. But that's where the value is for me in year one for Danny Gray, is when Shanahan schemes up a play to get him open in space and then let him run and let him outrun some people. And he's pretty good in that regard. And you'll see that top speed. So that's where I like it. But he's not a route runner at all. And that was pretty clear to see before the draft, because I watched him before the draft. I was like, oh, he's a good player. He's fast. But, he's not going to be breaking off routes left and right. And he's sort of a strider, and a lot of the sprinters are. And I think that's why, if you go look at the fastest guys in every combine, most of them aren't that good, because they're striders, and you have to be explosive in a short area in the NFL. And he'll have to work on that. He'll probably have to work on that his entire career, because he's a strider, and he's going to have to get his steps quicker, sink his hips, and get in and out of breaks quicker if he wants to be a bigger part of the offense and become, maybe a starting caliber player. But he doesn't have to be that right now for the 49ers. He can be a one-dimensional speed guy, use him on some gadget plays, trying to get him on some crossers, find him some space in the zone, get him the ball and let him catch and run and do some of those things, and just run off coverage and open things up for people underneath. I think that's going to be his role as a rookie if he does get on the field. But he's clearly going to be behind probably Ray McLeod too, who's going to be more of a slot guy. He's going to be behind Juwan Jennings, and he's going to be behind, obviously, the starters in Ayuk and Deebo Samuel as well. So it's going to be tough for him to see a lot of snaps as a rookie. So that's where you just – and it's just the reality of the draft and rookies. And we've seen how many rookies go into Kyle Shanahan's doghouse, right? The 49ers drafted a player number 3 overall, another top 50 guard, and then traded up for a running back in the 3rd round. And none of those 3 hardly saw the field as rookies, right? So you do have to temper expectations for guys drafted outside of the top 100. Even those guys are – a lot of times in this regime just as good as the guys they draft early anyway.
I think with him too is he'll be able to actually be a threat, because he has a quarterback who has an arm that could get it to him. And actually, not that they're not going to go out there and just chuck 60-yard bombs and, waste it down, but the threat is there. The ability is there. And, depending on how the offense is looking next year, how successful the run game is, how successful Kittle and Ayuk and Deebo is, they're going to draw a lot of attention. So there might be that one-on-one on the outside or wherever they line them up as. And we haven't seen that. We haven't had a quarterback since Kaepernick that could really, put some scare into a defense that they could actually hit something. So,
right. And those running backs and all those guards they drafted, they're going to run the ball a lot. It is a Shanahan offense. He wants to lead the league in rushing, right? That's what he's going to try to do. And so the play action and you've got a quarterback that's not afraid to let it rip and throw it deep. So might have more potential for some bigger plays like that. And hopefully Danny Gray's more involved in the offense than Travis Benjamin was.
Definitely. I gave him a B+ grade as well. Danny Gray. I mean, I think they nailed a lot of their draft, except for the running back pick at in the second or in the third round.
You can see where a lot of the picks came from for sure. And there's the 49ers. One thing they have done is they've consistently brought in players that they thought were going to come in and work. And I think part of it was that first draft and seeing players like Reuben Foster and seeing players like Joe Williams that didn't turn out. And they're like, we're not drafting those types of guys. Like, even if a guy's a step slow or, is not as good of a prospect, we want to bring in players who, it's not like they're trying to not bring in athletes, but they're trying to bring in players who they believe are going to come in and work and are wired right and are going to be physical, going to be tough. And you've really seen them hit on a lot of players because of that, because that's important to them. And it filters through the locker room. And I think that's why the 49ers have had one of the better locker rooms in the NFL. Yeah,
there's players out there that are in the news for all the wrong reasons. And I'd rather have the player that the Niners, that he's in the news for what he does on the field and not all the headaches that he's producing off the field. We had that with guys like T.O., when what's his name, who played for the Bucks, he quit at halftime pretty much.
Antonio Brown.
Antonio Brown. I don't want that. It's tough because people say, well, yeah, he's so talented. Yeah, but he has to be on the field. So you have to kind of weigh the two of those things, cost versus reward. Like, how much am I willing to give up or pay to a guy who's only going to be mentally in it like 65% of the time? Or do I go with a guy who's maybe a rung below that, but is super dependable, great teammate, studies hard, and puts in all the effort in the off season and all that stuff? So yeah, you don't want to team of choir boys, but at the same time, the Niners have had an up and down last 5 years, and just that they've had such a good locker room. And it's so nice to see, because we all know what the Harbaugh situation was when it ended and how bad everything was. So, hopefully that translates to a championship sooner rather than later. But, to me, it's so nice to watch a TV show or a highlight show and not have to hear about some guy getting arrested or somebody being busted for drugs at the airport or something. Like, I don't have to worry about that. So I'm okay with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's important. Bringing in high character guys is really important. And it's one of the best things this regime has done.
Definitely. Two more guys I want to hit on real quick. Spencer Burford. I thought it was Buford, but the R is before the F.
Burford.
Burford. Yeah. Even better. You're better. You can articulate better than I can. Offensive tackle from UTSA. Not very heavy, but he's got long arms. He's 6'4". He's not super tall. A lot of people say he's probably more projected as a guard than a tackle just because of his height. Would you agree on that?
He's a weird one for me, because it's almost like I thought I was watching the wrong guy, because 6'4", 304 isn't what he looks like on tape to me. He looks bigger. He looks like 6'5", 320. And on tape, he moves pretty well. So the tape is pretty good. And then you see his workout numbers, which were awful. Like, he did not work out well. He looks like he's a non-functional athlete for a tackle and maybe even a guard. Like, his workout numbers were flat out bad at only 6'4", 304. And it's like, that's a bad combination. Usually, guys get leaner and then work out at the combine to work out the best and run the fastest times and jump the highest. And then they get their weight back up, which is, I thought, what Burford was trying to do. But his workout numbers were terrible. But he moved, and he's not like a ballerina out there. He moves okay, and he looks bigger. Like, he's got really long arms, which I think helps. And I think his playing weight was probably higher than the 304 that we saw at the combine. He's listed at 6'4" here. And I wonder if it was something like 6'4.5", closer to 6'5", maybe even, at the combine, or if it was exactly 6'4". So I think he's a little bigger. He's got some length. And I was sort of surprised that they basically said, yeah, he's probably a guard, but maybe we can try him at tackle. If you were going to draft him there, I would have thought that they expected or at least wanted to try him at tackle first and let him fail there before pushing him inside, just because of that arm length. And he does have some athleticism. So
He does. He has long arms. Tackles, long arms. It's a
yeah,
thing that goes together. So yeah,
it's really
I'm sorry.
helpful.
Yeah.
And inside, it's not as helpful because
No.
in a lot of ways, it can be a hindrance. I mean, not necessarily a hindrance, but you want to be quick. You know, it's like
Mhm.
that Mike Tyson uppercut when you're on the inside, and that arm length doesn't help as much. But on the edge, you need that arm length because you're working against you're working on the outside against some really lengthy athletes out there. So arm length is really important out on the edge, less so inside. So to me, you would try to develop Burford as, you know, maybe a swing tackle as a rookie before moving him inside. But it sounds like they see him as a guard first and possibly a tackle second. So that makes me like the pick a little bit less. And he's not a supreme athlete, but I think he's a better athlete than his workout numbers. At least he plays that way. And I don't know what his actual playing weight is going to be, but I think he plays bigger than 6'4", 304. So I think he can absolutely fit at guard, and it's probably someone who's going to compete there at left guard if Aaron Banks. And look, again, they drafted another third round running back and 2 offensive linemen. So it tells me that they are definitely not convinced in their day 2 picks last year in the running back Trey Sermon and the guard in Aaron Banks. And so that's what this is all about. This is competition, I think, at guard for me.
Yeah, it's funny. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan say all the right things. They're very media savvy, but your actions dictate what you really feel, especially if you're doubling down on things that you did the previous draft. That means you don't have a great take or a great look or a great feeling on a guy that you drafted.
And Ambry Thomas too, right? Because
Right.
they went out and signed the one thing they did spend money on in free agency was a corner.
Yes.
You also have Emmanuel Mosley on the other side, who's really good.
I love you, man.
And Brett comes back, and then you drafted 2 more corners as well. So they must not have liked their cornerbacks from last year either. So, are they just going to throw away their whole draft class? Because that's kind of
what it seems like
about that is either they didn't like what they saw from their rookie class last year, or they loved these players so much that it didn't matter, or they just thought that they still needed more depth, or maybe they're preparing to let Emmanuel Mosley walk and they're preparing for life without Brunskill and Mack next year. And these picks are about future 49ers teams, which they should be, because, you know, rookies, we know, don't impact like you hope they do every year. So I don't know. It is a little head scratching with how similar this year's draft class looks to last year's when you start looking at round 3 and beyond.
What was your take on the Sam Womack pick? A lot of people are high on him. I was looking at some of the breakdowns that Jack Hammer was doing on the Twitter today. He seems to be big on Sam Womack, cornerback from Toledo. I guess the take or the consensus is that he is the future K'Wan Williams replacement. Is that what you see? Could he play outside, or do you think he's better suited as a slot corner?
Yeah, and we're just starting to watch deeper film on Samuel Womack. He's coming up next week in our in our episodes where we do a whole episode on the 49ers draft picks, and we might start doubling up on some of these guys. But Samuel Womack's interesting because, yeah, his scouting report sounds exactly like you're explaining K'Wan Williams, except he's got 4.38 speed. And that's where K'Wan Williams last year, right, was faltering, is when he had to man up and they would do those slot fades. And I mean, you know, that was tough for him to cover because he was never a fast guy, but he was always a tough guy. And he made a lot of plays, and he was around the football a lot. And even though he was small, he would tackle people, and he would be a force player against the run. And you see a lot of those things with Samuel Womack, who was, you know, a no-star recruit. He was a walk-on at Toledo, and he's not the biggest guy, but he's got athleticism, and he's a player. He's just a player. And so if you look for this class and you're like, okay, did the 49ers hit on one of those 5th rounders again? I think Womack would be that guy. And he fits, and he has a position that he really is a good fit for. The 49ers have a need there. And I think he'll absolutely be competing for that slot role. And depending on how they feel about Diamador Lenore, because I feel like he's a good fit for the slot role as well, competing with Darquez Denard in there. You know, I wouldn't be shocked at all if by the end of the year, Samuel Womack is the long-term nickel for the 49ers, and we'll just see how long it takes him to get there. But yeah, maybe there's your, you know, Dre Greenlaw-esque value pick for the 49ers, and they hit on another 5th rounder.
My whole thing is he quick enough to stop Cooper Kupp in the slot? Is that why they drafted him? Just so they have someone who can run stride for stride, because he was the kryptonite to the 49ers in the playoffs. and really through the regular season too. They
Yep.
couldn't touch him.
And if it's not him, I wonder if it might be Emmanuel Mosley. I wonder if Emmanuel Mosley might kick inside, and then they bring in Ambry Thomas on the outside, or Jason Verrett, and maybe Emmanuel Mosley's sort of the first nickel this year, while you figure out what you have with the two young corners in Diamador Lenore and Samuel Womack.
Definitely. Quick grade, real quick, of the draft. If you had to grade the draft, I know we didn't touch on everybody, but it's a time thing. But if you had to get a grade on just the whole draft in general, a lot of people say that B-. I kind of was okay with that. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's where it should be. B-, C+. I mean, they didn't have a first rounder, but maybe you hope that you get first round value from Drake Jackson. But then the Ty Davis-Price pick, a running back in the third, really leaves you with, to me, they got one player that had day 1 or 2 value in this draft. So it's really hard to put even a B on that. So C+, B- is probably where I'd put it, just because, you don't get credit for the guy you drafted last year in hopefully what becomes a superstar quarterback, right, in Trey Lance. But you don't get the credit for Trey Lance in this draft because you already used that one. We graded him last year, right?
Right.
So C+, B- I think is pretty good, and they're going to have to hit on one of these players. Tyrion Davis-Price going to have to be more than just, the small piece of the pie of a committee backfield. Danny Gray's going to have to develop into a number 3 guy and a legit threat on offense. Either Burford or Zakel needs to actually become a player and become a starting caliber offensive lineman for the 49ers. Either Womack or Tariq Castro-Fields, who I think was maybe, after Drake Jackson, my favorite pick now that we've looked more at Tariq Castro-Fields. I think he's a player too, 4'3", 6'1". How are you there in the 6th round? And so in a lot of ways, if you would have just taken the same rounds 3 through 6 and shuffled them up differently, I might like it more. And Tyrion Davis-Price might have been there in the 5th. And maybe, if Tariq Castro-Fields went in the 3rd, I'd maybe even look at this class differently because, I think it was this way around the NFL. It was a deep class, but there was right after that top 75 or so, I think rounds 3 through 6 were pretty interchangeable, because you see a lot of the 6th round picks and it's like, 4th or 5th round grade. And you see a lot of the 3rd rounders like Tyrion Davis-Price, 4th or 5th round grade. So I just think that rounds 3 through 6, they were all kind of the same value of prospect. And it just depended on what your needs were and what order you wanted to take them in. And you almost couldn't have been upset if both 3rd rounders, all 3 6th rounders, and the 4th and 5th rounders were in a completely different order. It really wouldn't have felt all that different, to be honest.
Yeah, this draft was, like you said, it was pretty interchangeable after about the 3rd round. To me, it felt like the 2021 draft all over again. But I don't know. Maybe they're just trying to get a lot of depth, and maybe we're all going to be wrong. I mean, I do think that they are setting themselves up potentially. I know potential gets people fired, but they're potentially setting themselves up to be a pretty deep team at like corner and offensive line, possibly, if both last year's guys and this year's guys work out. I mean, they could really solidify those areas. But like you said, C- or a C+, B- seems like a good grade. You said that you haven't really looked at the UDFAs, but you did have a little bit of on the 2 offensive linemen that were the Niners picked up, Poe, and I forget the name of the other guy.
Donovan West. I watched
Donovan West,
before the draft too, and he's another one that could have gone in the 4th, 5th round range, and nobody would have been surprised by that either. Some people were talking about Donovan West at pick 61, 2nd, 3rd round, and to that I responded with, don't love him there. I would wait on him. I thought he would have been drafted, though. I didn't think he deserved to be undrafted. But he at least played center. And so you have somebody that's played some center, because a lot of people are talking about Jason Poe as like, oh, he's the center. Well, he played guard in college. So to be the center, you got to at least start playing some center. So look, those guys, I think, have a path to the roster on the practice squad, most likely in year 1. I wouldn't expect a ton from them, but I liked both players, and I could see them at some point sticking and making it onto the 53-man roster. But there's really a glut of players right now. The 49ers have 2 true tackles in Trent Williams and Mike McGlinchey, and 1 true center in Alex Mack, and Jake Brendel's the backup there. I don't know if he's going to stick around or not, or maybe Donovan West, or maybe one of the other interior guys gets moved to the backup center role. But man, you have Banks and Jalen Moore from last year. You got Spencer Burford and Nick Zakelj from this year. You've got Brunskill already on the roster. You've got Justin School and Colton McKivitz. Like, they're not, those are all guards. Who's going to make the actual roster? Who's going to be the swing tackle? Who's going to be the backup center? And they didn't draft a center. So that's where, to me, there's going to be a ton of competition, and it's going to make the depth better for sure. Are any of those guys future starters, or did they just get more Colton McKivitz's in this draft? And did they get more Colton, and not to belittle Colton McKivitz, he's a fine player, but he's a dirty starter if he's starting. And he did start at tackle last year in a pretty important game and was okay. So I think that's sort of the 49ers have a type on the offensive line right now. And it is that Colton McKivitz, and it is that Justin School type, which, and it really feels like, especially this year, is both of those picks in Burford and Zakelj really fit that mold. And
that's what I heard you say on your show, that like, even especially the body type of Burford, he fits that Justin School, like really odd shaped human being, kind of like Grimace. It's like this weird kind of like, I can't explain it either. I've got a little bit of weight on me in middle age, but I still have a decent like shaped body for a heavier set middle-aged guy. Man, some people, when they put a little weight on, oh God, it's bad.
Yeah. And yes, a little top heavy, especially School. School is the ultimate bad body player.
Yeah, it's really bad.
And then McKivitz looks the part, but then has shorter arms. So it's like, well, can he play tackle? And he wasn't super athletic either, but he's that gold helmet guy for a reason. He's going to bring his lunch pail to work every day. So they have depth, but where is that breakthrough player? Was like, oh, they got something here. And I still think, of all the guys I've seen so far, I think Jalen Moore is the guy. And if I had to guess who's the fifth starting offensive lineman, if Alex Max is indeed sticking around, which it would seem he is sticking around if they didn't do anything at center in the draft. So McGlinchey's going to be there. Trent Williams is going to be there. Daniel Brunskill's going to be there. And it seems like Alex Mack's coming back. So there's 9 guys battling for that left guard job. Right now, if I was handicapping it, I think I'd put Jalen Moore as the leader, as the guy I think will win that job, just because I liked him better than Aaron Banks last year, and he's got a year up on the other guys. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. Definitely their depth should be improved on the offensive line for sure. And their depth is improved at running back. But, there's more than just depth too. And I was asked by a listener, who's going to be a dark horse to make the squad? And I said, man, it's harder. It's a lot easier to try to pick dark horses that are going to get cut rather than dark horses that are going to make the squad. Right. So there's definitely some camp competition, especially depth on, defensive line, offensive line, some wide receivers battling it out there for the very end of the roster, because we know who the top 5 are going to be, and are they going to take 6? So everybody else is battling for that last spot, if that's the case. And safety is the one that I'm still like, man, okay, is it really going to be George Odom? Is it going to be Tom Hufanga? Is that what we're going with at safety? So that's another one to watch. Or maybe after that gnarly Achilles injury, maybe Tarvarius Moore is going to make an appearance at safety. So that's still the biggest question right now on the roster, is safety to me. But clearly the 49ers don't see it that way, and they have a lot of trust in at least one or more of those guys. And I have a feeling they love Hufanga, and I think that might be who's going to be the starter week 1.
I thought maybe Tart would be coming back, but I'm starting to think just by the post-draft press conference, it doesn't seem very likely. Stunna here, I think it's Stunna Fillmore. I think he changed the end of his name. He says it's his first time hearing BD Peacock. Bro, go check him out. 49er or Locked On 49ers, Locked On NFL, it's the Locked On Podcast Network. You literally, every team has like their official podcast for their squad. I've been listening to Peacock for probably four years now. And first person I always go to, because like I said, now that Larry Kruger's off of KNBR, I'm like, I'm not listening to them anymore. But you're my dude. And Stunna, if you got to listen to anybody, just go to the Locked On Network. I think what is it, lockedon.com or lockedonnetwork.com?
I don't know. Easiest way is just go to BD Peacock on Twitter. I've got the links there for you. And me and Williamson are now on YouTube as well on the Locked On NFL channel. So check out that Peacock and Williamson. We're doing it up every day. And Locked On 49ers. It should be one of the first to pop up in your podcast apps, but check us out on YouTube now. We're doing the TV thing as well.
Yep. They're on YouTube as well. A little simulcast. two quick things, and I'll let you get out of here because I know you got some other engagements. A lot of discussion in the comments, and we're going to re-hit this. We kind of talked about it earlier. People are thinking Samson Ebukam should go because he makes too much money. There's an argument he should stay because he really hasn't been on the field enough to prove he needs to go or something like that. What's your take on that real quick again? Do you think he's a casualty possibly in training camp, or
yeah, I think he's definitely the dark horse to get cut just because his price tag. And so if Ebukam can't beat out the rookie in Drake Jackson, he might be gone, period. But especially if he can't beat out Jackson and Teray. Because the 49ers have a lot of bodies there. Amenahu, the bigger end, Jordan Willis, people forget about him, but he's going to be around and he gives some value on special teams as well. Kerry Hyder. So, Alex Barrett, I think, is still on the roster as well. So there's a lot of competition there. And if Ebukam is in a big part of the rotation, like the one or two guy on the outside, then the 49ers might look at that as in salary and say, we should roll that over. They might need to cut somebody to sign their draft class too, because I don't think they've figured that out yet either. So they restructures, some cuts, some dark horse cuts could happen. And we just went through the numbers. Like someone's going to not make the team on the offensive line, right? They just have too many guards.
Right.
So the versatility, who's going to be the swing tackle? That's the thing to look out for. Who's the player that enters the game for Trent Williams in the preseason? That guy's going to make the roster, right? So whoever the swing tackle is going to make the roster among guards. I would be trying Spencer Burford there probably if it were me, and we'll see if the 49ers do that as well. Because when you only suit 7 offensive linemen up. So of those 2 backups every week, you got to have one that's backing up center and one that's backing up tackle, right? So I think between all those guards, there's going to be a battle royale there. So that's going to be a really fun one.
Hey, it's a good problem to have if you got to have issues with trying to figure out what your depth's going to be behind key positions. So my last question to you, and I'll let you get out of here, is this report of the Trey Lance underwhelming and that it's possibly coming from Rich Scangarella and maybe he's got an axe to grind with the 49ers. What's your take on that? I made a video the other day, just a quick video, just kind of I didn't even really give my opinion. I just gave what was out there and then let people kind of go from it. Some people were saying, oh, you're speculating. No, I'm not speculating. I'm just going with the information that was put out there that maybe that's the reason. What is your take on that whole thing?
Yeah, well, I would say that clearly one of those ex-coaches wasn't on board with Trey Lance. I would say it would be really weird if everybody in the building was down with the Trey Lance pick, because we saw how we argued about who the 49ers were going to pick for a month after they traded up. I don't think Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch really asked anybody's opinion about trading up either. That seemed like something they did on their own. It's like, wait, are you sure? So it would be more shocking if all of the scouts, all of the coaches were all liked the same player in the draft, right? That would just be weird. Human nature would make us believe that would be just an oddball. So I'm sure there were some coaches and some scouts that liked Justin Fields or liked Mac Jones more. And clearly there was some folks in the building that definitely did like Mac Jones. And they've talked about how they like Justin Fields a lot too, that there was all 3 of the quarterbacks were in consideration. If the other 2 quarterbacks didn't exist, they would have drafted the 3rd quarterback that did exist, So they've been clear on that front. So, and the other thing I would add to it is that, there's always some sour grapes when
always,
again, human nature. So you shouldn't be shocked about that. But the other thing is, like, Peyton Manning underwhelmed as a rookie. Josh Allen underwhelmed for 2 years. It would be surprising again if a rookie quarterback didn't underwhelm. That's what rookie quarterbacks do. It's hard. And this kid was 20 years old when he was drafted, played 1 year of FCS ball, and that year of ball wasn't even the year before he was drafted. It was 2 years before that. So, of course, he's going to be raw. Of course, he's not going to be ready. So the underwhelmed report is like, what was the expectation? Underwhelmed versus what? Because I don't think there should have been expectation that a guy with his resume, and again, there's never been a player that was drafted. I'm not talking about first round. I'm not talking about number 3 overall. There's never been a quarterback drafted that had Trey Lance's resume.
Right.
Never happened. The last time that someone was drafted, period, was Matt Castle, that didn't play a full starting season the year before he was drafted. You got to go back to Matt Castle. He was backing up Matt Leinart, right? A national championship team, a top 10 quarterback, best team in college football that year. And he was a 7th round pick. That's the last time there was a guy that had a resume even similar to Trey Lance's. Trey Lance, or that didn't play the year before he was drafted, essentially. FCS 1 year, So anyway, the underwhelming thing is underwhelming versus what expectation? What did you expect from rookie Trey Lance? The only red flag to me would be if he wasn't a high character guy, if he wasn't smart, wasn't ready to work. That would be a problem, because that's the beginning of every bust quarterback.
And you got a Russell. Then you got what's her
DeMarcus Russell.
DeMarcus Russell.
Yeah,
man, when you watch some of those documentaries about how they give him blank tapes and they would ask him what he thought, and he would say everything's good, and it's just like, are you kidding me? Yeah, I don't think we have that issue with Trey Lance.
That is awesome. I love that story. He had like drinking scissor in the parking lot before practice. I don't think the 49ers have to worry about that. No. And if anything, that was one of the things, the deciding factors, is they believed in the character of the young man. And so that would be the red flag. And if that red flag's not there, which I would be surprised if it was, I don't think that's the thing, then yeah, he was a rookie, and we saw him play. We saw him get better in week 17.
Mm-hmm.
So the game didn't look too fast for him. I think he's got his head screwed on straight, and he's got a ton of talent. So whatever. The underwhelmed stuff is like, I can totally see where it's coming from, and I don't know what you're expecting from a rookie, because Peyton Manning underwhelmed, Josh Allen underwhelmed. That's the way it goes.
The whole draft class last year underwhelmed. Mac Jones at times underwhelmed. But I'll just say this. Grant Cohn was actually at camp, so this whole thing of they thought his arm was less than what they thought it was coming out of college, and this, that, and he could, the deep ball and all that. Listen, you can say what you want about Grant, but Grant was there live and in living color, saw this man chuck the rock. He has an arm. He can make the throws. That's where Grant was like, that's why I think this is kind of bogus, because I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. And yet there's this report supposedly that his arm is weaker than one thought coming out of college. I was like, wow, Grant doing investigative reporting there.
Look, and everything I saw from him from a physical perspective is what you saw on tape coming out of college. So if he's a little inaccurate at times, that was him. That was him in college too. So nobody should be surprised about that. I thought that the upside of Trey Lance versus the upside of Fields, that's the one thing I didn't get, is I thought Fields had more arm talent. I thought he had a better arm. I thought he was more accurate, which is what really excited me about Justin Fields, is why I had him over Trey Lance. So if, maybe they expected something crazy out of his arm, I don't know, but there's like nothing different from the film in college to what he was bigger when he showed up with the 49ers, and maybe the arm was even a tick stronger. So I don't buy that for a second. That doesn't even make any sense. Right. Again, the only red flag wouldn't be the inaccuracy, because they kind of already knew about that. The only red flags would be if he's not smart enough, he's not picking up the playbook, or he's not putting in the work.
Yeah, and none of those things seem to be the issue with Trey Lance.
Wouldn't buy that at all.
Brother man, I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to let you get out of here because you have other engagements. But once again, I never thought in a million years when I listened to your podcast 3 or 4 years ago that you'd actually be on my YouTube channel talking with me. So pretty freaking cool. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to do it. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and healthy, everyone. Have a great rest of your Monday. And Brian, I will see you next time. I usually stay and talk after, but I'm going to let you go. So until next time, everyone, stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Take care, everybody.